the question I had was about confessions. A while back, I went to a mass while I was on vacation, and the priest, during his homily, talked about a confession he had gone over, and he basically revealed every single detail of the confession. He revealed what the sin was in complete detail, and he did this about multiple different confessions. He said, this was one confession with this one guy, and this is what he confessed, and here's how the confession went. He never named the person. So my question was, is mainly what specifically constitutes breaking a confessional seal, and did he do that in that moment?
That's a great question, Ignatius. Let me answer it this way. I'll tell you a story they told me, okay, when I was first ordained. There was a dinner party where the priest was invited, and there were a number of people there. And he started talking about a case of adultery that he had heard in confession. Again, he didn't mention names. He didn't mention even where it was or anything like that. But he said how shocked he was because he didn't exactly know how to answer that. He was a new priest. And he mentioned this was the first time he had ever heard a confession. That husband and wife who were invited to the dinner party went home that night, and they had a terrible fight that almost ended in a divorce because the man's wife was very proud of the fact that she was the first person to go to confession to Father so-and-so. The identity of that person came out. So in other words, he disclosed her confession without mentioning her name or the place or anything else. First of all, if this is a thing, it should be reported immediately to his bishop. If nothing is done, it should be reported to Rome. That's a serious offense. Breaking the seal of confession is reserved to the bishop and or to the Vatican. It's that serious a thing. No priest is to do that. And even though he didn't mention the name of the person, it doesn't matter. You easily can give indications without even realizing when you're talking of somebody's identity. It should be avoided. Let me just say this too. Every time I sit down to hear confessions, when I'm done, I go in before the Blessed Sacrament just for 2 minutes. And I ask God sincerely, as best I can, to remove from my memory everything I just heard. Now, that's not always possible. There are some things that stay with you, some things that are pretty awful, and they just stay with you. But I really ask God to remove even from my memory what I just got done listening to and hearing. It's a very good practice, I think. I don't want that to ever come out. I don't want that ever to come out in conversation. This is why also, if I may, I know it sounds like I'm going all over the place, which I am, but I'm touching different bases. This is why it's very important for priests to watch their drinking also. Because when you have a few glasses of wine and you're in a social setting, I'm not talking about falling down drunk, right? But I mean, you're in a social setting, the tongue loosens and you begin to say these things. You've got to be very, very, very careful. And I think I know that today the strictness of this isn't being enforced, and it really must be. It must be. It must be. A priest has to be extremely careful of confessional material. And it's funny, there was a priest who came today. What a magnificent priest. On fire with zeal. It's so good to see this. It's so good to see this continuing in the church. He is a Portuguese, and he's very concerned because in Portugal, as in the United States, as in most of nations, they are trying right now, even as we speak, to make illegal any secret told to the priest in confession, especially involving sexual abuse. In other words, if the priest would hear anything in confession regarding sexual abuse, which is a very serious thing, if he did not report that, he would be liable to be arrested and put in prison. Now, you've got everybody wringing his hands. Now what are we going to do, and what are we going to do? The solution is a very simple one. The Catholic Church is 2,000 years old. We've learned a few things over those 2,000 years. And one of the things we learned was to hear confessions behind a screen. Now, if I hear something that somebody tells me legally I have to report behind a screen, I have no idea who said that. I didn't see that person. I don't know who said that. I can't identify that person. So I can honestly say, in a court of law, I have no idea what you're talking about. It's just very simple. I don't know. They're trying. No, they're getting lawyers involved. No. Why? It's very simple. It's simple. I think at around I was just studying theology, so at about 1975, 76, something like that, the Vatican came out with the new way of hearing confession. And so you were supposed to have a confessional room, and you're supposed to sit in two chairs like a counseling session. How absurd is this? Confession is not a counseling session. You want counseling session, you talk to the priest later on, or the priest should recommend a psychiatrist or a psychologist. That's a counseling session. You go into confession to confess your sins. That's what confession is about. Not to sit down and have a nice chat. You can do that. Go and make an appointment with the priest and sit down and have a chat in the rectory. That's fine. That's not what confession is for. But the idea was this: at that time, the priest was not free to not hear confessions that way. In other words, you, the penitent, were free to have your confession heard behind a screen or face to face with the priest in this confessional room. But the priest was not given the option. I refuse to hear confessions in a confessional room. I don't want to see you. I don't want to know you. I don't want to see you. I want you not to be seen. And I want you not to see me. Why? Because I want you to be psychologically happy with the idea that Jesus Christ is forgiving you, not Charles Murr. And when you're not seeing the person, you're hearing the words. Those words are Christ's words of forgiveness. That absolution. It just makes all of the sense in the world. Finally, years later, Pope John Paul II gave permission to the priest also to refuse to hear confessions face to face. Now, that was a big step in the right direction. When I go to hospitals and people are on their deathbeds, well, of course, I'm not going to put up a screen. I mean, let's be realistic. But even at that, I don't like looking at people eye to eye when they're giving their confession. I want them to be in the presence of Christ. I'm his representative. I don't want them talking so much to me. I want them talking to Christ. And I don't want them receiving my absolution. I want them receiving Christ's forgiveness. And there are ways that make that more palpable. And one of them is in a confessional behind a screen. And I think you're going to see more of that, ironically, as time presses on, because there are going to be legal matters that are going to push us right back to that, which is fine by me.